The Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
There's been a lot of stir recently about the Internet of Things, and everyone's saying that, well, not everyone, I should say, but a few people saying it spells the end of the world. It's the ultimate Orwellian situation where the Internet of Things rules our everyday lives. And I really don't actually think so. Mainly for one good reason. I think it's a good reason anyway, which is the Internet of Things. I should explain what the Internet of Things is before we get into it too deeply. The Internet of Things is it's a situation where most of our everyday electronics are connected to the internet in some way. Now, that immediately doesn't sound like a horrible thing, and it even more than immediately doesn't sound like a horrible thing to me either. Where critics come in, though, is that this will lead to lack of privacy. This will lead to government spying on our everyday activities and all these sorts of things. Now, that is a very good point. And as a rather strong privacy advocate, I do have to admit that, yeah, that sounds pretty bad. But something has to be considered too, which is we are constantly carrying around spy devices on us every single day, which is, of course, the cell phone. And so there's not really, it just adds on to it, I guess. It doesn't seem like it's very significant when we start talking about the idea of Internet of Things where our toaster is now connected to the internet. That doesn't sound like the worst scenario ever, because the toaster is not going to carry very many interesting metrics on our everyday lives that would be very valuable to government. Now, the only real caveat to this that I can see that really actually does have some privacy concerns is this information that's collected by these Internet of Things devices is almost certainly going to be sold to ad companies to sell better products. So we'll probably live in a world where our fridges have touch screens and they advertise produce when your tomatoes are detected as being spoiled. That's probably something that's actually not too far away. Honestly, I can see that happening next year or even 5 years from now. That seems rather likely, actually, considering how things are trending today. Now, that's not immediately a bad thing, so long as you purchase the item, understanding that this is what's going to happen, consenting to it, all these sorts of things. We can understand that. So the Internet of Things is not really something to be afraid of immediately, and really it's not something to be afraid of much at all, because just as there's going to be a market for items which are connected to the Internet of Things, there's also going to be a market for items which are not, products which have no connection to the internet. In fact, that's probably going to be a big marketing ploy, is this device doesn't connect to the internet. So it's privacy safe, or whatever buzz phrase they'll come up with at the time. So this is not really the end of the world. It seems like every generation, or even every 5 years, we have something that gets labeled as the absolute end of the world and it's going to kill us all. And the Internet of Things has actually been one of those items. So is it going to be the worst thing ever? And is it going to kill us all? Probably not. I can't imagine that happening. It's just going to be more fuel on the fire, I guess, for devices which are connected to the internet. And that's really nothing new, actually. That's not anything that surprises us. There are going to be items which are connected to the internet. That just is. And that's, again, nothing really new. We're going to be seeing people who are crying that the end of the world is nigh and all these sorts of things. And it's just something that happens every cycle or so. It's not anything new. It's not surprising. Remember Y2K? Everyone freaked out about Y2K, and it turned out to be basically nothing. Airlines had a few problems, and that was about it. And that was it. You know, talk about, what was it? It was May 21st, 2012, I think. Anyway, the 2012 end of the world thing. That didn't happen. That was 12 years after Y2K, and guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. Again. So nothing surprising. I think a few people killed themselves, but that was it. You know, it's just the end of the world is not going to come in any predictable sort of way. That's something that needs to be understood too, is especially if you take the biblical standpoint, there's not going to be any sort of predicted way where we can say, well, this is how the world's going to end, and it's going to happen this time in this way. Because, in fact, even biblically clearly states you don't know the day or the hour when the world's going to end. So why bother speculating? If we're very explicitly said we are not going to know, why bother speculating on something which is unknowable? It seems like kind of a waste of time and brain power. So the Internet of Things is not going to be the end of the world. There's not going to be some sort of effort to put every internet connected device in your house. There's not going to be some concerted effort to make sure you own an internet connected toaster oven. It's probably not going to work that way. Yeah, they're going to be heavily marketed, sure, but that is the same for any other new device. Yeah, Internet of Things devices are going to be very heavily marketed. Hooray. Big deal. Now, we see this actually a little bit with smart meters. Have you noticed that smart meters are becoming very popular? EPB cranks them out like nobody's business. Smart meters are an interesting way to control the whole power grid in a way that makes it so that power is distributed in a smart fashion, hence the smart meter moniker. Now, again, I don't know of any sort of conspiracy about smart meters. There probably is one, but as far as I know, smart meters are just another way to ensure that energy flows in an efficient way. There's not any sort of broad conspiracy to make sure everyone has a smart meter. It's just that it's the next step in technology, and we can't possibly expect it to use the same meters which we have been using for the last 20 years and expect them to work as well as new ones. It doesn't work that way. Things degrade, things get bad, and new technologies come out. It's like, when smartphones came out, there was not really any concerted effort by, say, government to make sure you all own smartphones. It was just great marketing that now we all own smartphones. Well, most of us. There are some Luddites around, but most of us own smartphones now. And there's not like any sort of concerted government effort to make sure that you all own smartphones. It doesn't really work that way. And I'm somebody who's very much into government's out to kill you, but still, there's not like a concerted effort. There's not some committee to make sure everyone owns a smartphone. That's not really a thing, because people will buy smartphones of their own volition, and it's just what happens. It's just how it is. So the Internet of Things is not out to kill you. Internet of Things is really more of a buzz phrase than anything, because I'm not seeing any marketing right now anyway for devices which are labeled as Internet of Things. Now, I've not personally witnessed that. It may exist, but I've not personally witnessed any sort of Internet of Things branded device or anything that comes up and says this device is compatible with the Internet of Things. So what are the positives that could come out of the Internet of Things? Well, actually, there are some interesting ones. So far, not a whole lot has been proposed in terms of home electronics that really interests me, especially when it comes to like appliances, because for me, I'm very minimalistic with my appliances. I have a mini fridge. I really don't care about appliances that much. They just exist, and I don't need them to exist any more than they already do. So I'm not really interested in Internet of Things devices personally. But I can say that there could be some cool things coming out of it. One of which, of course, would be when you place an item of produce inside your fridge, it tells you when it's going to go bad, and it'll alert you when it's gone bad. That's kind of cool. I mean, I think capable of determining when my apples are rotting, but nevertheless, it might be useful for someone who can't tell that their apples are rotting, that your fridge will now tell you that your apples are rotting. So this is a cool idea, although perhaps it makes us a little bit dumber as a population. I don't know. There are a lot of things that would purportedly, anyway, make us quite a bit dumber. We have a lot of new technologies that are out there, that do a lot of things for us, which previously everyone had to do his or herself. And that's really not that bad, actually. Think about accounting, where accounting is still really hard. I couldn't be an accountant because I'm terrible at math. But there are people out there who are really good accountants. But these people who are really good accountants still use internet programs, or rather still use computer programs. It used to be that there were people who their entire job was to be a calculator. Your job was to be a calculator. And then the mechanical calculator came out, and we didn't really need a human being to constantly calculate all day. And still, you needed accountants, but a human calculator was not really necessary anymore. Someone who was constantly doing arithmetic all day. That's actually what Mr. Scrooge did. If you remember A Christmas Carol, that was his job. He was a clerk, and all he did was calculate arithmetic. That was his job. So he has been made really obsolete. Mr. Scrooge would not exist in today's world because he's not necessary. We now have a calculator. The problem that we're going to be seeing, though, with a lot of new technologies coming out is we're going to see people complaining about the loss of jobs. The problem is anytime you create a new technology, there's a new set of jobs which are created as much as old jobs disappear. I mean, yeah, probably the human calculators complained and moaned when the mechanical one came out, but are we really bemoaning the loss of the human calculator now? Not really. Not at all, actually. I don't know of anyone who says, I wish we could go back to the days where humans did all of our calculations and screwed up a lot and caused ships to run aground. I'm not really seeing that. So we can assume that the mechanical calculator was actually a really good invention, and the digital one following that. Actually, I heard a story about the Apple II, where people were marketing the Apple II back in the late 70s to different businesses. And this one guy was an accountant, and he was shown the Apple II, and he was shown VisiCalc, which was a calculator program on the Apple II. And it was really advanced for its time. And this guy was practically shoving his credit cards in the marketer's faces saying, I need this now. He could do everything that he did in the whole week in one day on the Apple II VisiCalc. That's an amazing technology. And yeah, I'm not an Apple fanboy. I don't own any. No, I do own an iPod. I'll grant you that. And I think I own a few Apple keyboards. But I'm not an Apple fanboy by any means. But I do recognize that the Apple II changed a lot, and it made home computers kind of cool for the business people, because you couldn't find a school in the early 80s that didn't have an Apple II or several. So that just is how it is. And I thoroughly recognize the contributions to society which Apple has made. Now, moving forward, I don't think Apple's making a whole lot of contributions to society anymore, but previously Apple made some really great some really great contributions, I gotta say. So now we're seeing a hyper technologized. We're seeing a society which has a lot of technology, is basically what I'm trying to say. That being the case now, we're seeing a society where we are always on devices. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm not here to say, oh, I can't believe everyone always on their smartphones and their computers. That's really not a bad thing. And actually, we're seeing a pretty strong movement of people who are wanting to get back to nature in some sort of way. Outdoor Chattanooga is a great movement of people wanting to explore the outdoors in our local area. Not really my thing, but a lot of people are into it. I do not like being outside unless it's horrible and dreary and rainy. Then I like being outside. But if it's a nice sunny day in the summer where it's 90 degrees, I never want to leave my house or my office or my car. Either one, I hate being outside. So the lesson that we learned today is the Internet of Things is not really something to be terrified about. It just is what it is. It's a new innovation, and it's not going to kill us all. We're always worried about the new technology going to kill us all. Y2K happened when it happened because it had to happen when it happened. Think about this. Y2K happened at really the perfect time, where not everyone had a computer. I mean, it's 2000, actually 1999. Not everyone had a computer. Not everyone knew how computers worked. Especially the older generation saw no use for computers, didn't own one. Maybe if they did, they emailed. That's about it. So the computer was still kind of a new, scary thing to a lot of people. Now, it had been around since the late 70s, but still by 1999, the computer was sort of a mystical, interesting thing to a lot of people that was not really prevalent in our everyday lives as much as it is now. So the Y2K crisis happening when it did could really have only happened when it did, because now people are collectively rather tech savvy, not as much as I would like, but are still rather tech savvy, and probably don't think that some sort of cyber apocalypse is going to happen because 32-bit architecture or 16-bit architecture can't count to 100. That's probably not going to happen. And plus, we have social media to spread the idea that it's not going to happen, just as much as we have social media to explain or to extend the idea that it will happen. So go figure. It's funny how people just do not change. And that's been true for forever. People have not changed since people have been people. We've been exactly the same people for the last however many thousand years. We are still people. And we are always going to be people so long as we are people, and people don't change. The world around us does, but we don't. We act the same way we have for however many years. We just are who we are. And it's not really always a bad thing, because we do some pretty cool things. We do some pretty amazing things, actually. We've achieved a lot. But maybe achievements are relative. I mean, after all, what impact has it had, what we've done, except to better us? But whatever. Hey, that's cool. We've done a lot. And human beings have moved forward pretty interesting. And we've moved forward in a lot of very interesting ways, by the grace of God, of course. We are a very fascinating people. We are very unique. After all, I don't see any evidence of anyone that's quite as interesting as we are. So we are very blessed to live the way we do and to be who we are. And I don't see the purpose in complaining about so many things as we do. Yeah, I mean, sure, politically things are terrible. The political situation in the U.S. is simply awful. I've become entirely nihilistic when it comes to actually the political process. I see no point in participating anymore. It seems entirely worthless to worry about who's going to be president because really it just doesn't matter. Things are going to continue on the same trends which they have been continuing on for the last however many hundred years. That's the thing too, is as soon as a state is created, it declines. That just is how it is. And that's not to say like, oh, look how bad America is or look how bad every other state is. It just is how it is. Anytime you create a state, it's going to decline until it fails. And we are declining. We have been since the late 1700s. We are declining. As soon as the first law was passed that went beyond the base set of laws which we already had, we began that decline. And we're going to keep declining until the state fails and we make a new one, and then that one starts declining as well. It's a vicious cycle, a very vicious cycle that has a lot of people dying within it. But it kind of has to happen, no matter what kind of state you form. That's the thing. You can form a communist state. It's going to happen. It's going to decline over time. That just is how it is. You can create a monarchist, some sort of a crown royal system, and it's going to decline and collapse just like the Roman Empire did, just like the Ottoman Empire did, and just like every other empire and every other state is going to or has already failed. That just is how it is, and that's nature. And that's kind of okay, actually, because we're living in an interesting time where we are in the, I would say anyway, some of the later stages of our decline. Now, I don't know when the state is going to fail. It could be tomorrow. It could have been yesterday and I haven't realized it yet because I haven't checked the news. Or it could be 5 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 50 years from now, or 100 years from now. We don't know. And we need to stop worrying about, oh, what's going to happen in the next 200 years, and maybe perhaps wonder about what's happening immediately right now where we are. Now, yeah, long-term investment is a great thing, but sometimes a little bit of short-term investment is a good idea too. And I'm not really seeing a whole lot of that, especially long-term though. People are really not investing long-term. We tend to be a here and now society, and that's really facilitated by our technology. But we are who we are, and that just is how it is. You think people in the roaring 20s thought any differently than we do now? Probably not. Technology changes. We don't. And that's kind of okay, actually, because we've accomplished quite a lot. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. And of course, we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com. Be sure to check us out on Twitter, where you report the world decides. It's AM 1240. Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. And by the way, if you have a smartphone, which you really should, if you have a smartphone, you can get us on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone. And then you can see all of our great broadcasts on TuneIn. Also on Twitter, if you go to Twitter and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, you can see all over 4,000 of our tweets. In fact, we have 4,170 tweets as of now, and counting, of course. We're probably going to be getting quite a few more sometime soon. So as soon as we reach the 5,000 tweet mark, which is probably coming soon, we will let you know right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Something rather odd is happening in the world of legalities. Now, I do not like legalities. I think law tends to be kind of a waste of time in a lot of regards, especially modern law, because a lot of the laws we're passing now are entirely worthless. They serve no purpose other than to be controlling. But nevertheless, the legal system in the U.S. is kind of screwed up. It has been for a long time. And again, that just is how it is. But a guilty plea has been given for a man whom the police want the password for his phone. I probably mangled that sentence up, but we'll keep going, pretend that never happened. Federal prosecutors, according to Ars Technica, say that they want to continue with the attempt to compel Apple, yes, Apple, the company, the manufacturer, to unlock a seized iPhone 5S running iOS 7, even though the defendant in the relevant story, which was a felony drug case, actually pleaded guilty. On Thursday, defendant Jun Feng pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute methamphetamine. Feng was originally charged with 3 counts of possessing and distributing methamphetamine. As part of the government's effort to convict Feng, the feds wanted Apple to unlock a seized iPhone 5S belonging to Feng, but Apple objected, saying no. On Friday, United States Federal Magistrate Judge James Orenstein said in a court filing that he is confused why prosecutors are still trying to compel the tech giant, Apple, saying, in light of the fact the defendant against whom the evidence from the subject telephone was to be used has pleaded guilty, I respectfully direct the government to explain why the application is not moot, to the extent the response requires the disclosure of information occurring before a grand jury, The government may file its response under seal, along with a redacted version suitable for public access, which, of course, in every court system or every court case, the matters of evidence that are presented are matter of public record. So they can redact things if they want. I prefer if they don't, but it happens. The government's continued pursuit could suggest that it believes that Feng's phone may contain data relevant to another ongoing case. Feng was charged in conjunction with 6 other defendants. So the feds want Feng's cell phone PIN code, and Apple's not giving it up. So Apple is acting in a manner that is very pandering to its customers, actually, because if it turns out that Apple panders to the feds all the time, people are not going to trust Apple products. So this is a good move in terms of marketing on Apple's part, I have to admit. We're going to talk more about this after some words which I would like you to hear here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com, also and on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. Mark your calendars right now, because my guest this week is none other than one of the leading GOP presidential contenders, neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson. Don't miss a revealing conversation with candidate Ben Carson this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Fox News Radio, I'm Carmen Roberts. A top-ranking U.S. official says there's no evidence terrorists brought down the Russian airliner in Egypt.
ISIL had, in a tweet, claimed responsibility for it, and there is a very aggressive ISIL chapter in the Sinai, but we really don't know, and I think once the black boxes have been analyzed, perhaps we'll know more.
Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Today marks 15 years since the first mission to the International Space Station. The key word, international.
That kind of what, has really held this partnership together, I think, through some very trying times post-Columbia and, budget challenges and things like that. I think the international partnership is kind of the glue that binds this program together.
Astronaut Scott Kelly and a gloomy report on U.S. manufacturing. In October, it grew at the slowest pace in 2.5 years. Fox News, we report, you decide.
1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
There's a court case going on right now where a defendant has pleaded guilty. In this particular case, it's a drug trafficking case, actually. Methamphetamine possession and intent to distribute methamphetamine. It's all very nasty stuff, sure, if the allegations are true. Of course, this has not yet been proven. The man has not been convicted. He has pleaded guilty, but that is not a indication to his guilt. According to the jury, of course, you can't find a man guilty simply because a man pleaded guilty. It doesn't particularly work that way. It's up to the prosecution to present really good evidence that he is guilty. Of course, him pleading guilty does actually add on to it. Federal prosecutors said that they will continue their attempt to compel Apple to unlock a seized iPhone 5S running iOS 7, even after the defendant in the relevant felony drug case actually pleaded guilty. Oh, that's kind of weird. On Friday, United States Magistrate Judge James Orenstein said in a court filing that he's actually kind of confused as to why prosecutors are still trying to compel the tech giant, even though the man has pleaded guilty, saying in light of the fact that the defendant against whom the evidence from the subject telephone was to be used has pleaded guilty, I respectfully direct the government to explain why the application is not moot, to the extent the response requires the disclosure of information occurring before a grand jury. The government may file its response under seal along with a redacted version suitable for public access. Well, I mean, that's all well and good, and that's standard practice, but the government's continued pursuit could suggest that it believes Feng's phone may contain data relevant to another ongoing case. Feng was charged in conjunction with 6 other defendants, so perhaps the feds are hoping that this would have information in it which would incriminate some of those 6 other defendants. That's a pretty good assumption, I think. Here's the problem, though. Feng himself cannot be compelled to give up the PIN code for his Apple iPhone 5S. That would be a violation of the Fifth Amendment. So that's pretty clear stuff, actually. The Fifth Amendment, by the way, I'll just drag it out here. I've got a copy. I actually have the original Constitution right here. I stole it. Rights of persons. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, that's double jeopardy, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So there we go. Fifth Amendment actually has quite a lot of great stuff in it, and it's very clear on all of those different things, but that's kind of a problem for the prosecution. He can't be called to testify against himself. The feds want his PIN code. He's not going to give his PIN code, so the feds go to Apple to give the PIN code. That's pretty understandable. Apple then says, we're not going to give over the PIN code. Uh-oh. So now the feds really have no option. The feds are, of course, trying to compel Apple. It's not really working very well, but there is an attempt to compel Apple to give up the PIN code for this iPhone 5S. Apple is nobly denying that request because if Apple did, that would lead to lack of confidence in Apple's cybersecurity front, in that, well, if Apple just gives up its passwords to the feds, I'm given now no reason at all to have any faith in Apple whatsoever in terms of protections against government. So perhaps they will argue they want to see is on the phone for sentencing, says Jennifer Granick, an attorney and the head of the Stanford Center for Internet and Society. That's what she told Ars Technica by email, saying, but that type of information is likely less relevant in a drug case like this one than in other kinds of cases. Perhaps they hope to get a ruling they can appeal, and they don't want to have to start over again, but that strategy doesn't mean that this application is not moot. If Feng's phone had iOS 8 or later installed, as 90% of iPhones do, this entire issue would likely be moot. Apple now enables full encryption by default, and the company specifically said the move happened, so it's not technically feasible for us to respond to government warrants for the extrication of this data from devices in their possession running iOS 8. So that is a rather nice feature, actually. Which is why I would say if you run an iOS 8 phone, I would encourage you to secure it with a PIN code, not biometrics, not your fingerprint, and not any sort of facial recognition, with a PIN code that is not your birthday, by the way, because that's not a secure PIN code at all. Make your PIN code maybe 4 to 6 digits long, doesn't have to be terrible, something you can easily punch out, but make it so that only you know what the PIN code is. Don't go around telling everyone, basically, is the idea. And it's rather simple, actually, but the feds can't get into it, supposedly, and Apple can't even get into it, supposedly. So you'll be rather secure if you take this course of action. So I would say you should definitely take that course of action. I'm not sure about Android. Android does encrypt. I mean, there is an option to encrypt Android phones. I'm not entirely certain if it does it by default. I don't think it does, but citing an 18th century law known as the All Writs Act, federal prosecutors had gone to the judge and asked him to force Apple to unlock the phone. At its core, the All Writs Act simply allows the courts to issue a writ or an order which compels a person or a company to do something. In the past, the feds have used this law to compel unnamed smartphone manufacturers to bypass security measures for phones involved in legal cases. The government has previously tried to use this same legal justification against Apple as well. But this is the Feng case, and the Feng case is a little bit more open than these previous writs, which have been issued to unnamed cell phone companies. But with the Feng case, the judge invited Apple into the courtroom to present arguments as to why the judge should not order it to comply. It was the first time Apple was actually invited to speak against the government's request, and the company made a compelling argument as to why it should not be forced to do the prosecutor's bidding, saying this: the government proffered the reading of the All Writs Act, if carried to its logical conclusion, leads to disquieting results, says Ken Dreifach, an attorney representing Apple, saying that, for example, if the government wanted to crack a safe, it would require the safe's manufacturer to take possession of or even travel to the location of that safe and open it, he continued. If the government wanted to examine a car, it could send the car to the manufacturer and require the manufacturer to perform examination. The government could seemingly co-opt any company, any private company it wanted to provide services in support of law enforcement activity, as long as the underlying activity was authorized by a warrant. The All Writs Act does not confer such limitless authority, says the Apple attorney. And I got to say, wow, that's a pretty strong argument, actually, against Apple giving up this information. There's really no good reason for Apple to give up information, because this would create, like the attorney says, a precedent where government could ask any corporation or any private company or any individual even to do pretty much anything. So any company would become a servant to the government, and that's really not what we want. So it's a good thing that that's not how it is. Now, there are cases where the All Writs Act can be used in good ways, I'm sure. I haven't seen one yet, but there are cases where it can be done. But this is not one. This is the 21st century, and things have changed a little bit. And companies such as Apple issue out phones with the assumption on the part of the end user that these devices are at least somewhat safe and secure for everyday use, and are somewhat safe from prying eyes or hands or tentacles or whatever else. So Apple giving up this information about its smartphone does set a very dangerous precedent, where government could simply ask for the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, from any smartphone ever. And that's really not something which we want. This would lead to, again, a dangerous precedent where there's a drug case against some known drug dealer or what have you. And then this drug dealer has a smartphone which might have contacts in it, which government wants. So they issue the All Writs Act to Apple to unlock the smartphone. Well, that's all well and good, but what if that's not even possible? And this might hurt some court cases, but in the end, this is actually quite good for us because this means that we are secure yet again against prying eyes, hands, tentacles, whatever. So this is good news for us. It means that Google is actually not backing down, or rather Apple is not actually backing down on this. So I got to say, it's surprising on Apple's part. It's very surprising, especially considering Tim Cook is a rather liberal-leaning sort of guy. That doesn't mean that if you're liberal, you automatically have to love government or U.S. government, but I have to say that I would have personally expected him to want to at least put on a face of caring about what government wants. So this is a rather positive move on Apple's part, I have to say. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, and of course, we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com. You can be sure to check us out on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone. Just go to TuneIn and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see us streaming on your smartphone 24/7. By the way, we are also on YouTube right now. Just go to YouTube and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see us streaming live that way, which is yet another great way to watch us streaming live is on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, which is one great way to listen to us and watch us or whatever, however you want to do it. Google's getting into the physical space in yet another way, where now we're seeing Google ads on billboards. Google has taken its double-click online advertising from the internet to the streets of London, according to The Verge. The company started testing the technology, which automatically chooses and provides ads on millions of websites on billboards at multiple locations in the English capital. The double-click technology uses data collected in real time, including weather, audience, travel information, and local events, to select which ads to run, when they should be shown, and which billboards to play them on. The billboards, which started showing the double-click ads in October, are placed in some of London's most highly trafficked areas, including Waterloo Station and Euston Road. Other advertising companies have tested a similar technology in out-of-home settings, but this trial is particularly noteworthy for the huge web reach of DoubleClick, as seen as the de facto way to serve ads online. DoubleClick's Tim Collar told the Business Insider that there was a common misconception that merging web and out-of-home ad industries was straightforward, but that the trial was designed to show the companies involved what they need to change in order to make it easier to combine the two. Collar also said that it gave DoubleClick the chance to see if using real-time events such as sports scores would impact advertising and to target ads at audiences it believed would be seeing the billboard at certain times. This is very interesting on Google's part because Google is an ad company. Google has always been an ad company. Google will most likely always be an ad company. Anything Google does aside from ads is secondary to Google's main business, which is, of course, selling ads online. Now, that's not bad. Google's great at selling ads. In fact, I would applaud Google for its wonderful efforts in selling those ads because it does quite a great job. But here's the thing about Google ads. While they are great, they are everywhere. And again, I don't fault Google for that, but Google has a vested interest in making sure that Google ads continue to exist in exactly the same way Google ads have existed for the last however many years, about 15 now. No, about, how long has it been? About 17 years now. 1998, yeah, about 17 years now, Google ads have existed. Wow, that's weird. I have friends who were born in 98. That's weird. But anyway, no, the last about 17 or 18 years now, that Google ads have existed. Now, this means that Google has a vested interest in making sure you do not use ad block in any sort of meaningful way, which is why YouTube Red is becoming so controversial. YouTube Red is a subscription service that would allow you to watch YouTube videos without ads. Again, Google's an ad company. Google owns YouTube. It will allow you to watch YouTube without ads. And that also being the case, Google has started a partnership perhaps with AdBlock Plus, which allows Google to run ads on YouTube. So basically, YouTube has been whitelisted on AdBlock. It's annoying, but what are you going to do? So if you're watching YouTube and you have AdBlock, you're still probably going to be seeing ads. It's, again, very obnoxious, but that also just is how it is. Google is an ad company through and through. There's not really much we can do about that, but it's still kind of obnoxious. Well, here's an odd operation which has occurred just recently. You may have heard about it on Hot News Live at 5 on Friday. Happy Halloween, by the way. I did not go trick-or-treating, and I did not get any candy because I am a grown man, and grown men do not do that sort of thing. I stayed home and I played Terraria. That was my, and I filed affidavits too, but that's what I always do. That was my Halloween. Very boring stuff, just how I like it. Well, anyway, the KKK you might be familiar with. It's not really as prevalent as it used to be. There's not really a whole lot of people who can even openly say I'm a member of the KKK without getting criticized, we'll say, to put it lightly. KKK is now beginning to, have some problems because a group calling itself Anonymous is unmasking certain KKK members. Now, before we get into this, I have to say, Anonymous is a very loose organization. In fact, Anonymous is not even what I would call an organization. Anonymous started way back when on a particular website, and it was really more of I would say more satire than anything, and it soon turned into sort of a weird collectivist sort of thing, or hacktivist, I guess, sort of thing, and it became not fun. Nothing was done for the lulz anymore. It was just, we're doing it because we're super edgy activists for whatever. And in this particular case, Anonymous is touting itself as being anti-racist activists, which I think is really funny considering the past of Anonymous, but whatever. Operation KKK, an Anonymous-led effort to shut down the Ku Klux Klan, has begun in earnest. The main Twitter account is reporting that many KKK-related sites are now down after concerted hacking efforts that more are to come as they prepare for an action which is called Hoods Off November the 5th. Now, keep in mind, today is November the 2nd, so we have 3 more days until November the 3rd or the 5th, which will be a Thursday. So when Hoods Off occurs, we will let you know. So after closely observing so many of you for so very long, we feel confident that applying transparency to your organizational cells is the right, just, appropriate, and only course of action, wrote the representatives of the hacker collective calling itself Anonymous. We will carry out our mission and in a responsible, effective manner. We appreciate your patience and support for this initiative. Oh boy. In some parts of the internet, attacks are already happening. Actually, a self-styled anti-hate group hacker who calls himself MPED Attacks has taken down the official website for the Westboro Baptist Church, in addition to a number of KKK websites. Most damaging, however, is his claim that he hacked into KKK websites and gathered identifying information for a number of state senators and mayors whose addresses appeared in KKK databases. Now, that is interesting. Now, here's the conundrum which we run into here. As a proponent of free speech, as much as I don't like the KKK and I don't appreciate anything that it really has to say, I also recognize that the KKK kind of has a right to say what it says. That's kind of the weird thing. People can be racist. People are racist. A lot of people are. And while I like to think I'm not, I do have to recognize also that I can't control what other people say or think or do. And people are going to be racist no matter what you do. That's the thing. People are just going to be terrible, terrible people. And people don't change. People are always going to be prejudiced. People are always going to find some reason to be prejudiced. Back in the early 1900s, people really hated Irish. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, but people really hated Irish. Irish people were coming across the border, across the pond, and taking up my jobs. And that was always the argument. Oh, those Irish people taking up my jobs. Of course, it was New York. Those Irish people always taking up my jobs. Back in New York, up in New York in the early 1900s, people hated Irish people, just as people hated Lithuanian people, and really everyone else who was not Anglo-Saxon American back in the day. And that just was what it was. People hated Irish people. And I get it, but it's dumb. It's not the right thing to do, certainly, but it just exemplifies that while most people today probably don't hate Irish people, in the US anyway. In fact, now we have like Irish pride parades and stuff, so it's like obviously being Irish in the US is not a problem. People are going to find any excuse to hate somebody. People are going to find any excuse to be prejudiced against some group of people. Me, I don't like Catholics. I don't. I don't like the Catholic system, I should say. I don't care about Catholics themselves, but I do not like the Catholic system. It's bad to me. Now, I don't care if you are Catholic, and I'm sure we could be great friends, but I do not like the Catholic Church, I have to say. I'm kind of prejudiced in that way. That's my prejudice. Actually, seriously, that's my most extreme prejudice. I also don't like people who listen to Avenged Sevenfold. That's my other thing. I really don't like that band. And people who listen to that band tend to be very obnoxious people who think they're very hardcore when in actuality they are not. Those are my prejudices. They're over very petty, stupid things, just like every other prejudice is. It's always over something petty and stupid. Those are mine, and they're out in the open now. You can call me out for not liking Catholicism and for not liking people who listen to Avenged Sevenfold. You can call me out on those now. But I really don't care about you if you're Mexican or black or if you're Asian or any other race you want to throw at me. I really don't care because it doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't. I don't think about these things. I mean, if you were Asian, that's great and that's cool and you should be proud of that. Just as if you're black, that's cool, that's great, you should be proud of that. If you're Mexican, that's cool, that's great, you should be proud of that. Just as I'm proud of to be who I am. But that doesn't mean that I have to take special consideration of that all the time. And that applies to anyone. I wouldn't want anyone to apply special consideration to me either. That just is how it is. And that also being the case, KKK kind of has a right to exist, I suppose, in the sense that free speech is a real thing, even if I don't like it. And I really don't like it. But I can't say that I like free speech and then say the KKK can't say this. That's the conflict here with Anonymous, where I get what Anonymous is doing, and it is interesting. And I do want to see the names of the mayors and senators who are on this KKK database, but that's cool and that's interesting. But again, also, KKK has a right to exist as much as I don't like it. People can be racist and have a right actually to be racist, even though I don't like it. I think it's despicable, but people have a right to be that way. So that's sort of the wall that a lot of hacktivists run into, is there's not going to be any sort of law that outlaws the KKK. It's not going to happen. Now, I understand that this is a rather valiant move, I suppose, but it's lacking recognition of First Amendment rights that allow Anonymous to be as provocative as it is, which is not very, but it is. So anyway, they hacked into KKK databases, allegedly, of course. I'm not involved with Anonymous or any other hacktivist group, I should say. I am my own man that acts on my own accord, and to take down the WBC, Westboro Baptist Church, is just something I felt like doing because, frankly, I'm tired of them spewing their hate message, he says. That's a statement from Mr. Amped Attacks, is what he goes by on Twitter. The list, which can be found on Pastebin, is unconfirmed, although Amped Attacks claims to have cross-referenced KKK databases with public email addresses for the public figures in question, saying, I worked for 9 days to gather and verify all the information that was gathered before its release. I got the information from several KKK websites when I hacked them and was able to dump their databases. I went through many emails that was signed up with these sites, and a few of the emails that sparked my interest was the ones the politicians in question. There would be no reason for them to be signed up on any KKK website unless they supported it or was involved in it. This man is clearly a product of the public schooling system. Nevertheless, very interesting stuff is coming out of these hacks, these attacks, whatever you want to call them. Now, again, just as I recognize Amped Attacks' right to be very much anti-KKK, I also recognize the right of the KKK to come out with whatever public statement it wants and to have a website. That's the thing. Like, I don't like it. I don't like them. I don't like their message. I think it's childish. It's ridiculous. It's very racist. And it's not necessary. Perhaps it never was. But again, that doesn't mean they've no right to say that, right? I mean, I hate that sentiment where people always say, oh, you can't say that. Well, that just because you don't like what I say doesn't mean I can't say it. I have a right to say whatever I say. Maybe I can't say fire in a crowded movie theater, but I can be as provocative as I want, especially in a public forum like Twitter. That just is how it is. Now, Twitter obviously can remove tweets in terms of service. I get it, but it seems to be quite contradictory to be an activist group that really hates free speech. It just seems silly. And again, I don't like KKK. How many times am I going to say that now? I don't like KKK. We get it now. I don't like KKK. We understand. But it has a right to free speech just as any other organization or individual does. And so it seems very, very contradictory for a activist group which exploits free speech pretty often, and that's fine, to attack another group which exploits free speech quite often. It's just that my speech doesn't like yours. That's not really any sort of conducive way to move forward as society, to say, I don't like what this person says, so they need to be silenced. That's ridiculous. I don't like what this publication says, so they need to be silenced. Like, I liked Ron Paul when he was running for president, and there were a lot of websites that said bad things about Ron Paul. I didn't want them to be shut down because they have a right to say whatever the heck they want about Ron Paul. He can sue him if he wants, but that's his business. It's just ridiculous. Clutch of Keon Rose is coming up next. You're on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240.
This is a mob mode. This is the modern world.